as I talk to our 7,000 educators from across the country who gathered at our convention this year, I need you to focus on 7 things, 7 verbs, action words. I need you to educate. I need you to communicate. I need you to organize. I need you to mobilize. I need you to legislate. We will litigate, and I need you to elect. I need you to commit to taking an action every single day.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to At Our Table, and I'm your host, Jamie Harrison. Today, the president of the largest labor organization in the country joins me. Can you guess who I'm talking about? It's none other than my good friend, President Becky Pringle of the National Education Association. And there's no better time to chat with Becky. The kids are all back to school, and education, for those of us in education, it's been a pretty insane roller coaster this year. From the efforts to dismantle the Department of Education, to erasing history through book bans, to just last week in Florida, stopping vaccine requirements. One of our core values, access to equitable education, is really under attack. Friends, as a former teacher myself and as a parent, I'm deeply concerned. So I'm glad to dig into these topics and so much more with President Becky Pringle. President Pringle, welcome to our table. Hello, Becky.
Hey,
Madam President, welcome to our
Jamie.
table.
Oh, it's good to be at your table. Thank you for creating it, setting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is so good to see you. And I can tell you one of the highlights that I've had in my time as DNC chair was getting the opportunity to meet you and become friends with you. I am such a big fan of the work that you have done for so long, fighting for teachers across this country. But most people don't know, you become the head, you're the president of the NEA, but most people probably don't know you're an actual teacher. Can you give us a little bit in terms of how you decided that you wanted to become a teacher? And then what was the transition like going from teacher to now organizer to now the head of the biggest union in the country?
Oh, Jamie, I was born and raised in Philly. I do have my coffee with me. And, I am from...
Oh, the Eagles representing.
That's right. Wait a minute. Hold on. We got to say it right. It's the home of the world champion Philadelphia Eagles. Let's just be clear about that. They had this show Dallas last week, who we are again, but it's fine. It's fine.
Well, anybody who plays Dallas, I'm rooting for.
Oh, welcome. So, Jamie, I was born and raised in Philly, and I started teaching there too. I lived in North Philly until we moved on up to Germantown, and I can remember from my earliest days, I always wanted to be a teacher. I used to force my two sisters to play school on the front steps of our house. I'm not sure. I was a middle child, so I'm not sure why my oldest sister put up with it, because she used to beat me up on a regular basis. But I made them every day. So, I gave them homework, and they did everything just right. Then they would be, they would graduate to the second step. We had 6 steps in front of our row house. And by the time they got to the 6th step, if they were paying attention and doing their lesson just right, then they could graduate to the first step. And we do every day. I just love being a teacher. And Jamie, not only was I a teacher, I taught for 31 years. 31 years.
31 years in the classroom.
Yes.
And what grade and what subjects?
Oh, middle level learners. That's a nice way of saying adolescents. You never know whether they were coming in as a 5-year-old or as a 50-year-old. And that changed from second to second. I absolutely loved it. So I taught my students, and I purposefully say it this way, and you know why, as a teacher yourself. I taught my students the wonders of science. I never say I taught science. I taught my students, because we understand that they are humans. that we are. They are whole humans, right? And until and unless they know that you love them, that you believe in them, that you're going to set high expectations for them. I was a tough love kind of teacher, let me tell you. I'm sure that shocks you, right? But set high expectations. But I didn't just set high expectations. I made sure, I tried my best anyway, to make sure that I provided them with what they needed to meet those expectations. We had so much fun together, and I was so proud of what they accomplished by the end of every year. And I will tell you, because I was in classroom so long, every time every year, this time of year, it's like, something in my brain and certainly something in my heart. I get excited. I get excited because I feel like I'm going back to school. It's like this, new possibilities, right? I spent the whole summer trying out new experiments, I thought would be, exciting for them. They always wanted me to blow something up. Don't get me started on that. But
pretty much.
anyway, so I still feel like that every year, that it's full of hope and possibility. As the president of NEA, I will tell you, as we started this year, even though nothing can replace that sense, I did know that our teachers, not just our teachers, all of our educators, our school bus drivers and paraprofessionals, counselors and nurses, they all went back to school knowing that the federal government was working so hard to give their students less. And how were they going to stand in those gaps, which we do all the time. We do that.
Yeah.
But the gaps are bigger, and more students and families, by the way, are falling into those gaps. So there was, I had this kind of competing emotions about it. And we can talk a little bit more about what I heard, from educators all over the country.
I just have to say, I think when you think about really great times for various topics or subjects, I really do think middle school is one of the best times for science.
It is.
I can tell you who my middle school science teachers were, because I think it is that part of your life as a kid where you are really learning more about the world. And, from understanding volcanoes and having that volcano experiment where the baking soda and the vinegar and the explosion and all of that, doing science fair projects for the first time, all of those things, there's just amazing wonders. The amazing wonders of the world just open up to you, and it happens right at that time period between 5th and 8th grade, and which you're just like, you're walking around like, and you're going back home and you're telling your parents and your grandparents, well, do you know how this works? Do you know how this works? I learned this in science class. So I'm sure you had a fantastic time with students during that period. I have a 6th grader right now, so I know
that's right. Middle school at home.
He comes home and he loves science. It is one of his favorite classes, and he can't wait to tell us the new thing that he's learned. And Daddy, did you know this? No, I didn't.
You admitted that? Come on, Jamie. You're not supposed to admit that. Yeah, you are absolutely right. And you know what? For science is one of those. It's built into, that you're going to have that experiential learning, which we know is so all important in every subject, hands on, and making those connections to the world. I think physics explains everything. I really do. I can make a case no matter what you're talking to me about. And so I did that with the kids, whether they were playing sports or playing musical instruments, whatever their passion was, you could connect it to science. And so we had a lot of fun. We had physics day. They had to, be able to tell me all 3 laws, the laws of motion, and explain them. And then we just play all around the room. It was fabulous. But I tell you what, though, Jamie, my number one goal was to have them excited about science enough in 8th grade, so that in high school, they would take more science classes than was required by the state of Pennsylvania. So I don't know what your requirement was, but we only required at that time 2 years of science in high school. I wanted them to take 4 years of science. I wanted them to take
Yeah.
4 years of science. If they liked it enough, leaving 8th grade, then they would do that. And you better believe I checked up on them too.
No, I bet you did. I bet you did. Well, tell us a little bit about how you transitioned from being in the classroom to the organizing part and being an official at the NEA.
I come from a union family. Um,
Mhm.
Going back to my grandfather who worked on the railroads, and my dad and my mom, who was an education support professional. She was a food service worker. Oh, Jimmy, my mom was such a great example of where your passion meets your talent. So could what she could do with government issued cheese. She worked in Head Start. Let me tell you something, Jamie. It would make you want to slap your mama, but not mine. But
Yes.
she was so good. She would cook that Thanksgiving dinner that so many of those little ones, it was the only dinner they were going to have right before Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all of the suits from downtown, the school district of Philadelphia, would come to her Head Start Center to have that Thanksgiving meal. That's how good it was.
Well, and I'm sure she made the best mac and cheese with that government cheese.
Jamie, don't even get me started. I don't know how she made that gravy, but I tell you what. Anyway, my dad was a history teacher, and I'll talk about him too later. But so I grew up in a union family, so it wasn't a question whether I was going to join the union. I joined the union when I was in Philly, and joined when my husband took me kicking and screaming to Harrisburg, our state capital. I love Philly. I didn't want to leave, but it is where I started my journey within NEA, and my kids went to the school I taught. And in fact, I taught them. That's a whole other podcast. But
I am sure. I am sure.
I can tell you some stories. Anyway, the school district that I taught in and they went to really prided itself in excellence. And one year, the superintendent proposed to put 33 kids in my son's kindergarten class. He was just starting. What? No, that's not okay. Not okay. So it was a whole big thing too. They had the news cameras in our cafeteria, and Channel 6 News. And I stood up in front of Channel 6 and God, and I said, "Oh no, that's not gonna work." And I called out the superintendent. Our local president at the time came to me and said, "So Becky, I know you belong to the union, but you really need to get involved in the union. First of all, you have a big mouth. And second of all, we need to make sure that, you calling out your superintendent into the microphone." We knew it. And that started my journey. But I tell you what, Jamie, at the time, that was a while ago, as I said, 31 years. At the time, our local union was not engaged in the racial and social justice work that we do now. And my passion was around. I told you about my kids. When I checked up on them, my Black students were not going into higher level science courses, and I wanted my students to consider a career in science. And I knew if they didn't take those courses, that wasn't going to happen. And I talked to my local president because she said, "You need to get involved." I said, "Well, let me tell you what I want to do. I want to, have a program for our middle school students to get them ready to take those extra courses in math and science so they would prepare for those higher level science classes." And she said, "Well, the union doesn't really do that kind of work. But if that's what you want to do, we'll form a committee, we'll do something." That's what I wanted to do. Smart woman, talk about an organizer. You always meet people where the passion is. And that started my journey. And as you very well know, that is at the core of my racial and social justice. It is the core of my work to this day. And now we talk about our union work as having 3 pillars: our racial and social justice pillar, our traditional union pillar, where we're fighting for the rights of those people who have dedicated to lives, to educating our students, as well as our professional issues pillar, making sure that we are, as a union, we are taking that responsibility to ensure our professionals are well trained, prepared, continued development, and that sort of thing. So, that started my journey, and I became local president years after that, and now I'm president of the NEA.
Wow. I mean, that is an amazing journey. And I would love for you to say a little more about what the union actually does. As long as there's been a middle class in this family, it was created by unions in this country. But there are a lot of folks in these younger generations who just aren't as familiar with the work that unions have done and the progress we've made as a country because of the work of the unions. Can you give us a little more specifics in terms of what does the NEA as a union? What do you all actually do? What are the core roles and responsibilities for the union?
So, to answer your question, let me dig into the mission of the NEA. It is to advocate for education professionals, to advocate for
Mhm.
them, whatever that means, and everything that means, right? That means that we ensure or work to ensure that they have rights as professionals, as workers, that they have working conditions that allow them to do the jobs they love. We, of course, fight for pay and benefits. You know that teachers still have what we call their pay equity gap, where they make 25% less than professionals that are similarly situated. So professionals who have
Yeah.
the same level of education and the same years of experience. So continue fighting for continued fighting for pay and benefits. For us as an education union, we also include in our work fighting for their right to exercise their professional authority and collaborative autonomy to make decisions about teaching and learning.
Mhm.
And so that's a whole part of our work that gets into policy development. And policy development, as you know, at every level, at the school district level, at the state level, at the national level, is critical. I tell you what, when I when I stepped into I know you can identify with this. When my first day in my middle school classroom, I didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue about a lot of things, but I did not have a clue, Jamie, that every decision that was made about my kids and my classroom was made by somebody who was elected or appointed to office at one of
That's
those levels,
exactly right.
right?
That's exactly right.
So I say this now to the young people
And some of them never had kids, have never had to have kids in a classroom, right? Who are making decisions again about kids in their classrooms and families
Oh,
and the like.
don't even get me. They haven't spent a day in a classroom. Yeah.
Yes.
So they're making decisions. And so I began to understand that it was actually my moral obligation and my professional responsibility to be involved in deciding who those people were, whether elected or appointed. And so as a
Mhm.
union, we're involved in all of that, making sure we have people who are elected who care about our kids and our classrooms and our communities, making sure, or, working, as you very well know, advocating for those positions that are appointed by them, right? That we're doing our due diligence to make recommendations on who that is. So we do a lot of work in policy and electoral politics, as well as doing work in our profession, and then of course our racial and social justice work. And you know, Jamie, it's been a journey, and that's in
Yeah.
that particular pillar of our unionism to have folks understand internally as well. We're taking our own journey too. That racial and social justice um, have to be at the core and are at the core of education justice. So if we are going to say that every student, and if we mean every student, then we've got to unpack, and we have to address those racial inequities that are built in every social system in this country that impact whether student can come to school ready to learn every day. We've got to unpack that system of an inequity that's built in a system based on ability,
Yeah.
that discriminates against our students with disability. I will tell you, as a woman going into science, of course I encountered discrimination. Of course I encountered counselors who said, "Becky, that's too hard. You shouldn't major in math and science. It's too hard for you." Well, wait a minute, what? So all of those pieces that are still they're alive and well today, as you very well know, are part of our union work because it has to be.
I mean, those things are so, so important. And it seems like, in an America in which we say that the American dream should be available to all of America's people, it seems like it's a no-brainer that we should all be supportive of your efforts and the efforts to fight for racial and social justice. But when we think about it, I mean, when I think back, Becky, to who have been some of the most important people in my life outside of my family, the top of the list are teachers that I've had. I think any person that you would find on the street and you ask who are some of the most beloved people in your life that have had the most impact, and I'm sure 4 out of 5 people will say one or two of those people will be teachers, right? Who at some key moment have stepped in. So knowing how beloved teachers are, how impactful teachers are, how influential they are in terms of making us who we are, why then have we seen such demonization of the organization that represents those teachers? I see particularly on the right that, the Republicans are constantly coming after our teachers unions, and going after those folks who are just trying to make sure that our teachers are getting paid what they should, to making sure that the working conditions are good. What's your rationale behind why that is the case? The most beloved people in our country, some of the most beloved people, but yet they are demonized by some of our political leaders.
So, Jamie, I said I'd come back to my dad. I talk about him all the time. Um, and he taught history, and I hated history. I don't know about you.
I love history.
Did you love history?
Yes, I loved history.
I love it now, but at the time, I don't want to hear it. With 3 girls as we gather us together. Rebecca, that's what he called me when he's really mad or very serious. Rebecca, you need to know your family's history. You need to know that your grandparents were enslaved in Charlottesville, Virginia, and you need to understand that experience as best we can. He was always going on a pilgrimage, Jamie, to learn more about it, and he took us with him, his girls with him, to learn and to just stand on that earth, and remember,
Mm-hmm.
as much as we could, and learn and be able to talk to our own kids about it. So he said that. He said, you need to understand American history and all of the groups in this country that make up American history. He was probably one of the first. He was one of the first people I heard say, and now you folks saying it all the time, that Black history is American history. Native American history, it is American history, right? So he adamant about us learning that, and then he said, and you need to know world history. You need to know it, and he would give us the example to answer your question about that. Why are they going after teachers? Why? And unions. Well, the NEA is that intersection between both, right? Teachers and unions. And if you study history as you love it, you know this is true. And this is what my dad would say to me. Rebecca, if you look at the history, the arc of civilizations, of societies, of governments, you can see their rise and you can see their fall. And you can always point to the time when they're plateauing and starting to fail, when those people who are in charge, who those powerful people who are in charge, start to take away the right to learn for their
Wow.
citizens.
Yeah.
And what the lesson he was trying to teach us at the time was that that needs to spark something in you, that you need to stand up and fight. And if you read, even just in recent history, Jamie, those countries that have gone in and out of authoritarianism, those who weren't able to fight it back, those who fought it back, those who right now are in the throes of clawing back democracy. Um, you see educators on the front lines
Yeah.
because they
Mm-hmm.
have an outsized responsibility to not only educate their students, but to educate the broader public. And you see unions on those lines. So why are they targeting us? Because we are that cross section between both. And we are the ones that have that collective power and the ability to teach folks what's really happening in this country right now. And so we have become a favorite target for them because they want to take away that power. And that is what I've been talking to our members and allies and students about, that, no one can take your power from you. You have to understand the power you have. You know this to be true. Organized people always win eventually over organized money.
Well, and it's so interesting that you are also talking about, not only are they going after the people who teach our history, but they're also trying to erase our history. And we see it in places, and I don't know why Florida is just it is almost
You know
ground
why.
zero.
You know why.
Yes, it is one of the most diverse states in the nation, but it's the ground zero of the attacks on our teachers, the attacks on our history, on our shared history. As you say, Black history is American history. Latino history is American history. Native American, all of that is American history. But yet, folks are so hell bent on erasing that. Again, targeting the people who teach it, and while they are doing it, they're trying to eliminate the books that they teach from. What are the ways that the NEA right now is fighting back against that?
So our greatest asset, as you know, Jamie, is our members,
Yeah.
educators themselves, and yeah, we're about the business of focusing on our kids every day, and trying to make sure that they have what they need so they can learn, and work with our families, our parents to do that. And so they don't always know the power of their voice and the power of their story. And so one of the things that has been very critical during this period of time is helping them to recognize that. And while that can be a natural thing, sometimes you need to have some training. You need to have tools so you know how to tell
Mhm.
your story. And we're building that across the country. So we're partnering with Heal Together to build what's called Public School Strong, and that is a project where we are working to get at least 3 people in every single school district, every one, that are trained and prepared to lift their voices up at the local level, right, with their school boards, but
Mhm.
also at the state level, the legislature, and of course ready to do that at the national level. Because there's nothing like a teacher telling a real story about a real student, and
That's
how,
exactly
we
right.
can, I'm talking about $86 billion cut from SNAP. Who understands $86 billion? Nobody. Well, the billionaires do. They understand it very well. But average people don't. But teachers who live in those communities and are support professionals, oh my goodness, they're so good at breaking that down. And one of the things we did was we put a map of the U.S. together, and we drilled down so that folks could see what those cuts to special education to our students with disabilities in their congressional district. Because did you know this? One in every 100 people is an NEA member. Americans is an NEA member. That's how
Wow,
that's
I
how
did
large
not
I
know
know,
that.
right? We have an NEA member in every congressional district in this country. So that's why it's so important for them to be able to tell their stories at those levels, at those places where they're closest to our kids, closest to our communities, right? And so, but we're preparing them to do that. We're training them to do that. We're doing it with allies and partners. So that is a critical part of our work. As you've seen since January, we are training them on organizing. Beginning with Organizing 101, having those one-on-one conversations, understanding where people's passions are, meeting with them where they are, letting them know that their level of activism and mobilization can go from writing a letter to hitting the streets, right? All of that is part of mobilization. So those are some of the things that we're working on. I have been involved in right now as we not only stand up to fight back against the terrible, cruel, evil, mean things that have been immoral, things that illegal. Okay, I could just go on and on.
Mhm.
Things that have been done right now, but also we're very clear, Jamie. We're very clear. We can't just fight against. We can't just fight back against. We've got to fight forward. We got to fight for that vision where when we say every student, we mean every student.
Yeah. One of the things, Becky, I think has been really interesting, is, you know, people see the NEA as generally supportive of the Democratic Party. I think the NEA has probably endorsed every Democratic presidential nominee since Jimmy Carter. Um, but one of the interesting things that you have done under your presidency is that you've been putting forth an effort to also, because every teacher is not a Democrat, right? And I'm
That
sure
is
you have
correct.
members who are not Democrats. But you have been putting forth an effort to attract Republican and conservative teachers. Can you describe what you have done in order to make sure that they are part of the mix and that their voices are also heard in this process of advocating for our teachers and our kids?
Well, first of all, about a third of our members are Republicans.
Mm,
And so it's a lot. The first thing is to listen. You need to listen, and we all need to listen better. We just do,
yeah.
right? And one of the joys of my job, Jamie, I do miss my eighth graders. I miss that. And there are times when I think I'm talking to adolescents too. Don't get me started on that. In adult shoes. Um, but it's important for me to go to those places. So, as part of my back to school tour, I went to Iowa and just listen. And that's important to hear them talk about what's happening in their communities in a way that they can talk to their neighbors who don't necessarily are not you in those cases are not Democrats. And though you are correct, we have our endorsements of presidential candidates have been Democrats since Jimmy Carter. That's when we first started. Um, we work with anybody who supports public education,
Mhm.
who really understands that public education is the foundation of this or any democracy. And if they say that, we're working with them, who supports educators who are fighting to make sure that they are doing the things that need to be done to get at the educator shortage that we know exists in states across the country, that cares about kids, all of our kids, no matter their zip code, what they look like, what their ability is, whether, like my granddaughter, they have two moms. All of them. And so whether the Republican, independent, or Democrat, then we're going to work with them. And so what I talked to you about, our the work we're doing with our members to use their voice and get training to do that. We are specifically targeting our Republican members to do that because their voices resonate in their own communities with their families, with their neighbors. So it's really important that they understand that, what we've seen, oh my goodness, in the Republican Party is not something that they can explain or stand behind. That you're Who doesn't want to feed the babies, Jamie? Who doesn't want to feed the babies? Come on.
Uh,
Who
and
doesn't want to do that?
there are folks who don't.
I
They rather give a
know.
tax. They rather give a tax cut to the gun manufacturers or what have you,
Yes.
instead of actually having. I grew up on free and reduced lunch. Becky, I can tell you, um, there were so many kids like me who that was if they did not have that, they would not eat. And if you do not eat, you can't be a productive person or a productive student in the classroom. Right? That breakfast in the morning, you get off the bus, you go and you get that breakfast. You would not have that. I mean, I can recall, for us that it got so hard sometimes in which we did not have money to buy milk. Like I had to put water in my cereal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and that's the reality that a lot of kids live in. And to see some of these folks with such bitterness and harshness that they'd rather cut that instead of, maybe giving a billionaire a little less of a tax cut. I mean, it just does not make any sense to me. It really does not make any sense to me. And then the poor teachers have to deal with all of that because those kids, when they come to that classroom, they bring everything with them.
Everything.
All of the baggage. If they didn't eat, they bring that with them. If it's an abusive household, they bring that with them. If something happened in the neighborhood, they bring that with them. And the teacher now, who's already underpaid, not appreciated, now has to deal with all of that. Not for one student, but a classroom that could have 30 students or 35 students, and in some places even 40 students. Right. That is the thing that I just can't get my arms around. These folks who we should be putting on a pedestal, but yet we continue to beat them down. I think about my time. I was a teacher. Uh, I taught one year, ninth grade social studies, geography. And I was just overwhelmed. And I went back to my high school to teach, but I was overwhelmed with all of the things that you have to do, all of the relationships you have to manage. And you got to deal with the administrators who are all on your back about all of this other stuff. You have to deal with kids who are bringing all that baggage. You have to deal with parents who want to accuse you of something when all you want is what's in the best interest of their kids, right? And I saw many folks like me, young, you go in starry-eyed, all hopeful. And at the end, you're like, hell, you can take this shit. I can't. You ain't paying me enough to go through all this. So you, as the president of the NEA, what do you say to those young folks to stick in for a second year, to go on for a third year, to move forward in the fourth year? And on top of that, they now have a federal government and sometimes state governments that are finding every way that they can to make it harder for them to do their jobs. What do you say to those young people?
It is, uh, as with everything in education, it's a complex and complicated issue, and there's no one solution because it's multifaceted. So, what you just described, Jamie, you're that statistic. You are those students who decide to go into teaching. We are most at risk of losing them in those first 3 years.
Yep.
And so we have to focus like a laser in addressing exactly what you just said, but we've got to look at it holistically. We've got to look at the front end of the pipeline and all the way through. Dr. Ivory Tolson, I know know him, a researcher,
Mm-hmm.
who worked in the Obama administration, and he did some research for us at the NEA because we were trying to dig in. We've been actually watching this for almost 3 decades, about 2.5 decades, the trajectory of students going into education and then staying. And one of the things that he helped us uncover, and so I talk about it a lot now, is it's not only attracting them in, but it's the retention of educators, and
Yes.
especially educators of color, and especially Black
Of color.
teachers,
And Black
and
men,
especially
which are
men.
even
Right. So
yes.
all the way, we're going to unpack all of
Yep.
that. And so his research is really helpful in us trying to address it from attracting those students, those very students, into the profession at an early age. And so we've supported, NEA has given grants to organizations that have helped us attract students even as early as middle school, but mostly high school, and working with colleges and universities to give them college credit as they were in high school, but actually having them do hands-on work with students while they were in high school, and working along mentor teachers so that, when they ultimately went on to college and graduated, got their degree and education, that they had this long trajectory of having the experience. It wasn't that first day in the classroom saying, "Oh my gosh." They also didn't get into the classroom, didn't have a mentor that was trained and paid and given time to actually mentor them, right? In real life situations. And so as I talk with young people, it is about them understanding that, if we are not meeting your needs, then your union needs to be a part of that solution. And so reach out and sit like me. With my own local president. Like, this is what I want to do. Can you work with me to do this? You can do that. Use your voice. Use your agency to fight for those things. And then when you're there, reach back, and it's your responsibility to reach back and help others. I will tell you, Jamie, NEA did a survey. I was so surprised at the results, because we were seeing things going in the wrong direction as relates to retention of teachers. And we were shocked to find out that the 55% of educators were planning on leaving the profession. And when you dug into that, it was going up to upwards of 59% of Latino educators. And for Black
Mm,
educators, it was 62%.
wow.
62%. We're planning, not talking about it, planning on leaving the profession. And that was shocking enough. But then we looked at it, because I talked about the early educators, right? When we looked at it throughout, the career, not only were we seeing early educators that were planning to leave, but those in the middle of the career and even those at the end before they reached full retirement, because of all the stress that you talked about. As an educator, it's not a small thing to be made the villain. You brought up Florida a lot because we could use them as a poster child for all of the
Yeah.
terrible things that have happened. But there's so many instances where they're attacking the teachers themselves, going after their licenses because they're not falling into the ideology that we've been talking about of this Republican Party, and going after them directly. And so that's part of our work too, is defending their right and their jobs and all of those things, entering into litigation around that, as well as the terrible, horrible, really bad, no good bill, and all of the executive orders and all of that. So that's an important part of our work. And our young people need to see that we are fighting. So there's that. But they need to see there is a place for them to fight too, that they have power and they are part of a larger community of people who are organizing to use that power to fight for what their kids need and what they need as professionals to do their jobs.
I love that, and that's the one thing that I often tell young people, you don't have to be a victim in this, right? You have the power to fight back. Young people are the largest voting demographic in this nation, the largest voting demographic in the nation. There's no group that's bigger than them, but they're also the lowest performing.
I know.
And so
We have a lot.
you can change this country to be what you want it to be, but you got to use your voice and your power in order to do that. And hopefully we can do more of that. One of the things I would love to see in the next Democratic administration, because I know this current administration and I want to get into them, uh, don't want an empowered and informed electorate. But we got to figure out where we went wrong on civics in this country and bringing that back and bringing it back much earlier. It can't just be some elective in your senior year that you skip out on because you're trying to, you do your job or whatever. It needs to be something that we teach from very early on. And, and some school systems do a good job of this, and some they need to do better. But very early on, like I want my first grader to know what it means. And my son does. I mean, because we drill it in his head, but all first graders should know what it means about these elections and why it's important to have, mayors and city council people and state house people and congressional people, and what their job is and what their responsibility is to them. Part of our problem is a lot of people in our country don't know what the hell our government is supposed to do for them. They don't know how it works. They don't know who the right people to call and when something's going wrong or right. And so we really got to figure that out more, because a society where the folks don't understand how their government works is one that is destined to fail. And I see more and more of that happening right now in this country.
Absolutely. Civic education is critical. And it started with them to actually taking it out, not having required course. But PBS, which is under attack
Oh,
itself,
yeah.
they knew what you said was true. You got to start with the young peoples, the young
Yeah.
people. Schoolhouse Rock and how a bill becomes a law. Yes, yes, yes. Sing it, so you know it. Yes. So you are absolutely correct. We have to start with our young people right at the beginning, and we have to dig into it. And, we talk a lot about whitewashing history, them whitewashing history and banning everything, and shrinking the curriculum and all of that. I always talk about it, not only from a place that I was, saying with my dad, you have to know your history. It's not only that. Part of knowing your history and understanding that is understanding how you take on issues today,
Yeah.
and how what happened in history impact to this day. We could talk about why there is not that generational wealth within Black families, and tie it right back to redlining, right? I mean, so it's not like it happened and it's no longer happening. So we have to unpack all of that. And so it's absolutely essential that our kids understand, that our students and people understand that when there are injustices that are being done, or when they are fighting just to have a good paying job, or for healthcare, or a place to live, Jamie, that there are levels of government that that are responsible for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Different levels of
Yeah.
government. You understand that, and to your point, who do you call? Why is voting so important? And so, yeah, I'm concerned, as I hear in your
Yeah.
voice too, with our young people.
Well, and I also want to say this, Becky, you can't say it, but I can say it, because I found out in my U.S. Senate race here in South Carolina, the large majority of teachers who did not vote. I almost fell out of my chair when I found out that. I mean, so folks, for our teachers also, like you got folks who are advocating for you, but you got to advocate for yourself too. You got to get yourself and go to the polls and cast that ballot and vote, because these people are passing bills that are impacting you and the quality of your life and the conditions in which you teach in. You can't just leave that to naught. So again, I want to get you in trouble as president, but
I'm like, say it, say it. It's just, So, and I'll say this, because I keep saying it. I'm repeating myself, I know, but I need to keep repeating myself, that it is important for you to vote in every election, in every level of government, everyone.
Exactly.
And it's not just vote. And I want to emphasize this. You have to stay involved, so that the
Yes.
people that we elect can feel that wind behind them, and they have, they know that they have you, so that they can govern
Exactly
boldly.
right.
They can pass the kind of laws that you're asking them to pass. Otherwise, we put them in office and they don't, or they don't think that they have that power. But you better believe you better believe we, the NEA, are addressing that. But I will say that overall, there are places in this country where our voting record is not what it must be. But overall,
Hmm.
educators vote at a higher level than most
Yeah.
other people,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
because
yeah.
they do understand, and it is always, and say young people too. It's always about making the connection between voting and policies, voting and rights, voting, and so if we don't give elected leaders what they need so they can lead and govern boldly, then our young people get disillusioned. Others get disillusioned and say, "Well, why? What's the point? What's the point? What's the purpose?" So we have to think about it as a part of the work, a part of their responsibility, voting, but it's not. It doesn't end there.
Elections have consequences, right?
Mm.
Well, we saw what the consequences are of this last presidential election. Donald Trump made a promise about eliminating the Department of Education, passing this horrible, big, horrible bill of his. What are some of the implications of his attacks on the Department of Education, this bill that just passed on education in general? Can you just let some of our listeners understand what they should know that is now coming down the pike as a result, and how it may impact them and their families and the folks in their communities?
Yeah, it's for me, and I'm right here in the DC area, as I watched it unfold and I joined so many of the workers, the employees from the Department of Education, on the streets fighting. Um what I learned very quickly was, for most people, you say Department of Education, yeah, but so what? So what?
Yeah, yeah.
So we had to unpack that for folks, and it had to be them talking about. So, having parents talk about their students with disabilities, not being able to get the resources, assistance from the Department of Education. We had families and students. Oh my goodness, we had this incredible student who talked about the fact that the Trump administration gutted the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Education. And so they had a
Mhm.
long standing claim that they just dropped. Students,
Wow.
black students in particular, that were being discriminated against in her school. So they don't have the people to fight for those things. We know that the Department of Education came, that the core of their work came out of the civil rights movement of the late 60s and ultimately passing the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which funds, so many things from students who come from those families that have less income, to our students with disabilities, as you know, and ultimately the passage of the Individuals Disabilities Education Act, IDEA,
Mhm.
and focusing on the federal government, focusing on trying to fill those gaps the best they could of inequities that were built in the system. And so the Department of Education has a huge role to play in that. And so, we had parents talk about how they would were calling and calling. They couldn't get help from the department when their kids were, done everything we asked them to do, and they wanted to go to college and they couldn't get help to fill out their financial aid forms, or they weren't getting the Pell Grants. I mean, all of these things were impacted. So that's part of the story, telling those real stories that we're engaged in, because most people don't know all of that. What I just said, that the Department of Education is responsible for that. So the fact that in Project 2025, Donald Trump laid out what he was going to do, and then he did it and decimated the department in a way that students are suffering because of it, are things we need to unpack and we have been unpacking in every community. And I'll tell you what, Jamie, and you know this from where you are, where you're from. One of the most impacted communities are rural communities. because
That's exactly
they
right.
don't know it though. See, they don't know that their hospital is being
Where the resources are coming
they
from.
don't know
Yeah.
that. But the
Yeah.
federal government has to put out, an outsized amount of money into those areas because you don't have as much income coming in to that local area or even the state necessarily, to actually meet the needs of of folks living in the rural areas in America. So we have to make sure that we are drawing that through line so they understand you are being impacted more than anybody else because you
Anybody
don't
else.
know, but the federal government's providing those funds.
Well, Becky, and that is something, as someone who grew up in rural communities, and you understand that one, many of these communities are taxing themselves out of existence anyway, right? Because we know how schools are funded in those areas. They don't have a huge tax base, and so, but they have increased their taxes to the highest level, and it's if that turnip has no more, if there's no more juice to get out of it, you're not going to get anything out. And so they rely on the state government and the federal government to subsidize some of the initiatives that are going on there. In some of those areas, you also see disproportionate numbers of kids who with disabilities, with special needs. And as we know, those kids, that education is a little more expensive than sometimes the other education because
That's
of
right.
the special needs that they have. Well, when the Department of Education starts cutting those resources, gets rid of those things, folks, it is a five-alarm fire. I want you to know that your kids and your communities are going to suffer and suffer greatly. And you think about the states that are going to be the most impacted. Yeah, Donald Trump is always targeting blue states, but red state folks, you better wake the hell up because you are going to feel some pain that you have never felt before. And it's coming down the pike. I mean, it literally is coming down the pike. And your state legislatures are so inept. Then you got these Republican governors who have their heads in the sand, right? Who wouldn't even take the money for summer school lunches and all kinds of stuff. And their kids so desperately needed those resources.
Yeah.
So there are going to be a lot of Republican MAGA people who are going to suffer because of the policies of your MAGA representatives and MAGA governors and senators and Congress people. So
Yeah,
understand where that pain's coming from.
that's right. And I want to be clear. That's already happening.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
to come is horrendous. To your point, Five Alarm Fire, for sure. But it's already happening. A lot of people didn't even understand the real impact when Donald Trump decided he was gonna impound the $7 billion, and then he released it 3 weeks later, right? And people are like, oh well,
Mm-hmm.
he gave it. He wasn't. Of course, he wasn't allowed to do that. That was appropriate by Congress, but
So, Becky, one second. Can we get a little more clarification for those of us who may not be following everything every single day? $7 billion freeze, the Trump administration that took place earlier this summer. Can you just give us a little more about that?
the freezing of that money had an immediate impact, Amy. First of all, that was illegal, and that money was already a promise to our schools from Congress, and so we ultimately had to release it. But the chaos that came from that, what was immeasurable, and it continued into the new school year because right away school districts had to make a decision to not have summer school or to reduce the access to summer school for some of their students, after school programs that they had set up, whether or not they were hiring educators from teachers to bus drivers. All of those decisions were being made towards the end of the school year. So even after the money was finally released, there was just so much chaos and confusion, and everyone was off to their to the summer, and so they had to scramble over the summer to figure out, okay, now that we have the money released, what are we going to do? How are we going to bring teachers back? So it had a huge impact even into the school year, and it's one of the reasons why, Jamie, as I talk to our 7,000 educators from across the country who gathered at our convention this year, I need you to focus on 7 things, 7 verbs, action words. I need you to educate. I need you to communicate. I need you to organize. I need you to mobilize. I need you to legislate. We will litigate, and I need you to elect. I need you to
I love it.
commit to taking an action every single day. And so that inspired them when they realized, even when they fought to have money and had it, that this president could just take it away in the blink of an eye. They understood how important it was for them to collectively act.
Yeah.
So I don't want to talk about it as though it's not happening now. And as I visited schools around the country last week, and educators talked about the hunger that they were seeing in students. And one of the things that all of us saw front and center during COVID, it's not just our kids, it's our families. Because when we were out there with the school buses and providing meals, it was the families. The families were showing up, right? We know the kids take half of their lunch home. We know that for their families, or that's the only meal they're going to have. And
Yeah.
so teachers were reporting the level of hunger. One of our locals in California, so proud of them, one of our local unions started a food bank in Alhambra, California. And the demand was so great, Jamie, they as a local couldn't keep doing it. And they reached out to the city council and they grew it bigger. But they had over 2,000 families that showed up at their last event, and they had to turn 200 away. These are people who are
Wow.
hungry, and so the effects are happening right now. I want to be really clear about that, and they're going to get far worse.
Mm. Well, I have to talk about the impact that COVID has had on our schools. We're 5 years since COVID. How has that impacted learning outcomes, students, teachers, and particularly in this environment now in which you have an administration who just frankly doesn't give a damn about education? What are your thoughts, and do you see any path forward for us?
So one of the things that as a society, as a world, we have to understand is that COVID impacted all of us, not just our kids
Mhm.
and our schools.
Yeah.
And by the way, Jamie, it's still impacting all of us. We can see
It's
that in
still
workplaces
I
all over the
I see
country.
it in my kids. I still see it in terms of my kids and their own mental health,
Right, that's right.
it has that lingering impact.
That impacts their ability to learn. So let's, like we always do. Well, learning has been impacted. Our teachers aren't doing what they need to do. Our schools aren't. Let's talk about our society and what happened to our society. And you said it perfectly. Kids bring all of that to the classroom. Do you think that's not going to impact their learning? Of course it's going to impact their learning. Of course it is. And unless and until we deal with that holistically with the kids themselves and their families, then that's going to continue to have impact. But we know that we have to, as a society, as educators, we know that more is required of us for our kids right now. And so, in addition to fighting for the funding that we're getting less of, in addition to fighting for the additional mental health services that we know we need for them and their families, we know we have to dig in and we have to, as educators, create innovative ways to bridge those gaps more quickly.
Mhm.
With integrated learning, I talked earlier about experiential learning, which we know can accelerate learning, providing the additional one-on-one tutoring that we need, making sure educators are getting professional development that they need so that they can create different learning experiences for our students. But let me say this, Jimmy. It is our shared responsibility. It is our shared responsibility. Educators cannot do this by themselves. We do have
Yes.
more that we must do, and we need others helping us.
Well, and on that, on school safety as well, I mean, what? There have been 8 school shootings resulting in injury or death, I think, thus far this year in the US. Do you have any other thoughts on what we can actually do other than just get other people elected in office who actually give a damn about it?
So don't discount that because as you very well know in the Biden
Yeah.
administration, we passed gun
Yes.
legislation, gun safety legislation. It was 30 years before we did that, but we knew at the time it wasn't enough, right? It was a bipartisan bill, but it wasn't enough. So we know that we have to focus on gun safety, and not just in our schools. Let's be clear. It is the leading cause of the death in our youth right now. And that's not only happening in our schools, but our communities too. Common sense gun safety laws. We know what they are, and we have to keep fighting for that. But we also know that we have people, students and people within our community whose mental health issues have not been addressed. We know that. So we have to focus in on that, and we know that takes resources to do it. And so that's why I said don't make that a throwaway line. We have to make sure that we're electing people who understand that so they can pass policies to keep our kids safe.
Well, two more questions. This first one is it's a little silly one. We do it for every episode. We give our guests an opportunity to present an award to somebody who is special. We call this award the Sit Your Ass Down Award. Someone who just needs to take a break, sit down, get themselves back together. So, Madam President, here's your opportunity to present to somebody in the policy space, whomever you want. Who would you present this week's Sit Your Ass Down Award to?
Well, first of all, I have to take a drink out of my cup for a minute. So as I answer your question, Jamie, I remind your audience that I am from Philly. So now you speaking my language now. Sit your ass down. Just yeah, and that's a hard question because there are a lot of people. And when you say when you say this week, I probably would go with Robert Kennedy because he didn't want to vaccinate our kids. But I'm gonna still go with the WWE czar, the wacky world of education czar, Linda McMahon.
Yeah.
Who's reigning over, the Office of Civil Rights now, which is bringing cases against the very people who are discriminated against. So the person who didn't even know what IDEA stood for, and she's responsible for helping our students with disabilities, didn't even know what that, and they still voted for her. Jamie, they still voted for her.
Clue.
Oh my God.
And, Becky, this is a thing that pisses me off about this administration, who talks about diversity, equity, inclusion all the time, that these people aren't deserving for these positions. This is the most unqualified bunch of secretaries that I have seen in this nation's history. They are clueless. They would all get Fs in your science class. Linda McMahon, sit your ass down. Go with Vincent somewhere. Go with Vince, your husband. Go to Mar-a-Lago. Y'all sit next to the pool or whatever, but sit your ass down and get the hell out of the Department of Education.
And stop pouring A1 sauce over everything when we're talking about artificial intelligence. Don't get me started.
Exactly.
Jamie, don't get me started. This is the person? Seriously? Seriously?
It blows my mind. It blows my mind. It really does. Because she gave a campaign donation, she now can become the Secretary of Education. It's a joke.
It is a joke. But that's a tough competition there. Whew.
Oh, I know. Well, on a serious note, you are winding down your tenure as president, and you have been nothing short of masterful as president of the NEA.
Thank you.
When you start to think back and reflect on the things that you have been able to do, what is the legacy of NEA president Becky Pringle?
When I became president 6 years ago, Jamie, I articulated a strategic vision that the NEA, not just our members, but we would lead a movement across the country to reclaim public education as a common good, as the foundation of our democracy. But we couldn't stop there. We had to transform it into something it was never designed to be: a racially and socially just and equitable system that prepares every student, everyone, to succeed in a diverse and interdependent world. That has been my North Star in every decision that I've made as president. Every place I go, every table I'm invited to be at, And sometimes, as we know, where I had to take my folding chair and bring it to the table. Right? You know about that.
Right. Yes.
And so, as I found myself after this election, actually having to say this out loud, and I'll be being candid with you too, Jamie, in progressive spaces too, I had to say out loud, the NEA will never walk away from its commitment to racial and social justice. We will
Amen to
say the
that.
words. We will say them. As you try to reduce them to 3 letters, say the words. Diversity.
Yes.
That is our strength. Equity.
Yes.
Making sure that every student has what they need when they need it. Inclusion. Creating those windows and mirrors so we can see ourselves and others. So we can build that inclusive society. Say the words. So as I prepare to leave office, I won't stop. I'm not done yet. But I tell you what, this organization is on track for leading that movement. And I say to my members, and it comes from my heart, team. I say to them, we get to do this work. You can be tired and discouraged and disillusioned, but I need you to remember, we get to do this work. And that's how I feel every day. I am blessed. I know what my purpose is, and I get to do this work.
Well, you have done a masterful job in this work. And I just want to say a special thank you for that point you just brought up, that we have to also remind people in our circles, in progressive circles, in democratic circles, about this work and the value, because sometimes I think some people forget. But it's so important that we remind even our own allies that we cannot just turn a blind eye to diversity, to equity, to inclusion. So, Madam President, thank you so much for being at our table. This was, I had such a great time with you. I can't wait to see you. You know, now they put me back on the DNC as former DNC chair. So hopefully I get to see you before you transition off. But thank you again for everything that you have done for our teachers. Thank you for what you do for our students. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being at our table.
Thank you, Jamie. And thank you for continuing to live in your purpose. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or anywhere you find your podcasts. To be the first to know who will be at our table next, find us at ourtablepodcast.com. At Our Table with Jamie Harrison is a production of Vision Blue Media. Our founding executive producers are Jason Hayter and Jamie Harrison. Our producers are Kyle Kelly and Emily Harrell. Our content consultants are Ernie Grigg and Clay Middleton. Our digital communications are led by Silly Riccio. Neil Rossini of FWRV LLP provides production legal. Title sequence by Tom Hunt. Our theme song, Blonde Gone, is written by Dewey and published by Alibi Music Library. We recorded this episode at As Told by Studio in Columbia, South Carolina. Very special thanks to President Becky Pringle and her team at the NEA. I'm Jamie Harrison, and I look forward to another conversation at our table.